Joining us now, NBC's Julie Sirkin reporting on Capitol Hill. Former Democratic Senator of Alabama, Doug Jones, now a distinguished senior fellow for the Center for American Progress. Doug Heye is former communications director for the RNC and a political organization consultant and contractor. All right, Julie, give us the odds, at least as they stand right now, that the government shuts down tomorrow night.
Oh, man, putting me in the hot seat, Chris. Look, I definitely feel worse about the government staying open now than I did 24 hours ago when we spoke. And it is because Senate Democrats have decided to play hardball at really the last minute here. I mean, they had weeks to say that their strategy was to push for this 28-day CR, not to just swallow whatever the House actually managed to pass. And I think there's a couple of reasons for this. The first one being that they really underestimated that House Speaker Mike Johnson could actually get almost all of his Republican members to vote for a continuing resolution when so many of them have never voted for a bill like that. And the second is, of course, because shutdowns are so damaging to the public. It is not a winning argument or a winning issue, no matter which side of the aisle you're on. And Democrats have, at least in the last decade, been the party to forcefully campaign against shutdowns when Republicans tried to force them and did, in some cases, make them happen, including under the first Trump administration. So now they find themselves in a complete bind. In a couple of minutes, they're going to be huddling behind closed doors again. There are no votes on the docket at this point today, with the government funding deadline just about 36 hours away from now. And they have two options. One, do they continue playing hardball? Do they continue feeding into what their base is asking them to do on social media, at town halls, asking them to fight, to take this opportunity to shut it down, the first time that they can really step against and fight back against what the Trump administration is doing since the election? Or do they agree to some kind of deal with the Republicans, maybe an amendment vote, which would essentially just be a show vote because it wouldn't pass, and then produce the votes necessary to get to that 60-vote threshold and then get to the final vote on that long-term government funding bill? I want you to take a listen to what we heard from members on both sides of the aisle about this morning.
The right way to do it would be short-term CR and then let's get a budget deal. So that's my preference. But again, we'll see what the Republicans say.
That's not going to happen. So it's either shut down or we pass the funding measures.
But Democrats always claim they dislike government shutdowns. Now they're ready to play, shutdown politics here. It's absurd.
For us to just surrender to a partisan, destructive piece of legislation that would last for 6 months is unacceptable. This should be a bipartisan process.
Democrats really had a lack of strategy going into this process. It is a little too late in the game now for them to have a winning argument if they do shut the government down. They may say that Republicans control the House and Senate and the White House, but all of the headlines will read that Democrats are the ones that caused this shutdown. And by the way, then they have to figure out how to reopen it. And the guy across Pennsylvania Avenue, Donald Trump, the president in the White House, is certainly not afraid of calling them on their bluff and shutting down the government and having Democrats own it.
Well, that's for sure, Senator. Donald Trump is not afraid of wreaking havoc. I mean, how do you view the position Senate Democrats are in up against a party completely loyal to Trump and whose long-term goal is actually dismantling the federal government, right? And I mean, arguably, your biggest weapon is shutting down the federal government. How do you see it?
Yeah. Chris, Democrats are between the proverbial rock and a hard place. There is no question about it. I do think that they did not think that Speaker Johnson could get the votes in the House to pass a purely bill almost all along party lines. It's interesting that everybody's talking about how that the Democrats are playing hardball, but the fact is that the Speaker of the House is also playing hardball because the Republicans and the House of Representatives are not going to be around. There has been no indication that there was an effort at any kind of bipartisanship to get something done. That's the way things should be going. But the fact is, we are where we are. And the fact, if the government shuts down, I think the biggest problem Democrats have is how to message that. It's a little late in the game, and Democrats have not been doing a really great job about messaging so far. And I fear that they will get blamed for the chaos. It's a tough situation to be in right now, but they've got to make a stand. They got to take a point, and if it is a bipartisan effort, and they want to, if that's the hill that they want to die on, then send it out there. Let's get it out there right now. But make no mistake, it's going to be a tough sled for them.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder, Doug, is it a hill that they die on, or is it a hill from where they build something even taller? How do you view this?
I don't think we know at this point, and I would agree pretty much with everything my much more distinguished friend Doug has said there. This is everybody essentially going to the mattresses, everybody playing hardball, Republicans in the House, in the Senate Democrats as well. House Democrats at this point, Chris, they sort of don't exist. They'll go on TV and say what they want to say, but they're shut out of this process at this point. So we're really looking at what can happen in the United States Senate. I can tell you, having worked through the 2013 shutdown that lasted 16 days, I tend to view government shutdowns as failures. And I know that Republicans typically get the blame for it. By the way, they typically earn it. But what we're seeing now is a very different politics. And yes, Republicans do own the House and the Senate and the White House, but I think voters are smart enough to know that there aren't huge majorities there, not enough for Republicans to do really whatever they want to do in the House. And certainly in the Senate, where you still have a slim majority, Democrats all of a sudden have found that they like this thing called the filibuster that they didn't like not too long ago. It's what has put us exactly where we are right now.
So I think, Senator, it is fair to say we're in a very different position than we've been before. No shutdown that led to a furlough happened in a president's first 100 days. None have come close to furloughing the number of people Musk wants to fire anyway, certainly not under these circumstances. So is there also a risk in the Republican bet that Republicans won't have the stomach for this?
You know, I think that they're willing to take that risk right now. They have tolerated a slash and burn chainsaw type approach that the Trump administration had to the federal government right now. So they've got a strong tolerance for cutting, shutting down, sending people into the streets, packing their bags. And so I think they got that tolerance. And I think we're a game of a chicken right now to see who might blink. And right now, I don't see Republicans blinking at all unless this shutdown gets to a point in 20, 30, 35 days like it was when I was in the Senate. People are going to start screaming and hollering a little bit louder, and the constituents, people need to talk to their representatives. All politics is personal, Chris. When this starts being personal to the individual constituents that these Republicans represent, that's when they may blink.
Let me pose a couple of alternatives to you, Doug.
Which one?
One is that, frankly, anybody who's paying attention closely the way we are to what's happening on Capitol Hill probably is already baked in on one side or another. There are a lot of people out there, shocking and disappointing as it may be, who are not following the 35-hour machinations of whether or not the government is going to shut down. They are continuing to follow the price of eggs. They're continuing to follow whether or not a bottle of wine that used to be, $12 is going to cost them $30. They're continuing to follow whether or not their friends and family have health care, all these kinds of things that you know about. And then there's another part of that maybe if that doesn't get better, they don't like both sides. Throw the bums out, whoever the representative is. I don't know. It seems to me like there's a lot of possibilities beyond the idea that this is going to be the motivating factor, at least in the short term, about how the American public feels about Congress. But maybe I'm wrong about that. What do you think, Doug?
You know, anybody who's not following the minute-by-minute machinations of the House and the Senate leads a much better and happier life than anybody who does, clearly. But as you pointed out, they are following the price of eggs, the price of gas, what's happening in Washington. Typically, we've called them low-information voters, which I think is frankly false and an insult. Their information is what they live through every day of their lives, and that's very real. Where I would caution, though, about looking at any real political impacts at this point is, and again, I go back to 2013. What we did as in the House Republican leadership is we said, okay, our members are going to have to touch the stove. And they're going to realize that stove is hot and they're going to burn themselves. The reality is they touched the stove, they leaned on the stove, nobody got burned because we were a year out from the elections. If we have a shutdown that goes on for 16 days, hopefully it doesn't go on that long and certainly not longer, it's really hard to say in March of an out year what the midterm impacts are going to be next November. That's just a political reality.
Great.
Agree. We have bipartisan agreement. Thank you both, Doug Heye and Senator Doug Jones. You're sticking around. As always, Julie, thank you for your great reporting.